Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mhairi Aitken. As Herb said, I'm an ethics fellow at the Turing Institute. I'm really excited to be here today, but I may be caveat with a little apology that I might not be as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as I would like to be. I've had a fair few sleepless nights recently. There's been a lot of things keeping me up at night. There's a lot to worry about at the moment, isn't there? Not least the cost of living crisis. I think that's a big worry for everybody. And then we have the worries of the bees. I've lost a lot of sleep worrying about the bees and the future of bumblebees in this country. But now it turns out that it's not just bumblebees that we need to worry about with threats of extinction. It's actually us as well. We're actually also at risk of extinction. You may have seen these headlines. I'm sure most of you have seen some of these headlines. We've heard a lot of these claims across all the kind of major news outlets in recent months, across all the TV channels, across newspapers, across magazines, claims that artificial intelligence, AI, is potentially developing its own form of intelligence, superhuman superintelligence, that it might be able to develop its own ability to choose its course of actions, might ultimately become a risk to humanity, potentially even leading to human extinction. It's pretty scary. It's really scary stuff. This scares me, right? It really does give me sleepless nights. It really does keep me up at night. It scares me. But not because it's true. I don't think it's true. I'll explain in just a moment why this scares me, even though I don't think it's true. But before I do that, let me just give a bit of context as to who I am, so the work that I do, and why I'm up late at night worrying about claims of existential risk from AI. As I said, I work at the Alan Turing Institute. The Alan Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for AI and Data Science. So my work is all about AI. I work in the AI field, and it's a really, really exciting field to work in. It's a great industry to work in, a great area to work in. There's so much happening in the field of AI. But over the last 6 months, we've seen some really amazing, incredible transformations in this field, and not just within the AI industry, but also in kind of public discussion, public interest, and public responses to AI. It's been really incredible or unique kind of transformation and the amount of interest that we're seeing in AI at the moment. As an example of this, what took me by surprise was how it affected my children. My kids don't generally take a lot of interest in my work. I think that's normal for kids. But up until like a year ago, I would sometimes, try and engage my kids, do you want to hear what Mummy does at work? And I'd tell I work in AI. And sometimes they would say, wow, Mummy, that's so cool. You work in AI. Can you build us a robot? And I'd have to say, sorry, I'm not that kind of AI researcher. And very quickly, I went from being the cool parent that I desperately want to being the disappointing parent, which sadly all too often I am. But it's changed. It's really changed. That's a year ago. That's what my kids would have said. But a few months ago, my kids came home from school. And you always know when your kids come home from school, there's something on their mind, there's maybe something they've heard at school that they want to talk about, something that's worrying them. And my daughter said to me, Mummy, you work in AI. Does that mean you're building computer programs that might take over the world and destroy us all? I'm paraphrasing slightly. But it really took me back and saying, no, don't worry. I'm not that kind of AI researcher. Now, I'll tell you in a moment what kind of AI researcher I actually am. But what really shocked me about this exchange, what really shocked me about this development, is the extent to which the narrative around AI has shifted in a really remarkably short period of time, and the extent to which those concerns, the claims around existential risk, have reached into public discourse, even reaching my pretty young children, which is quite phenomenal. And it's not just my children. I think we're seeing this across wider public discourse, wider public discussions around AI. A year ago, I think if we spoke to most people about AI, asked them what AI meant to them, they'd probably say self-driving cars, smart speakers. But now, when people hear the term AI, they tend to think of ChatGPT, or maybe image generators like Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E. In some senses, that's kind of progress, because there's an increasing recognition or increasing awareness that the AI systems that we're all interacting with on a daily basis, or even on an hourly basis, are not really physical machines or physical devices that we can touch and see and feel, but actually, for the most part, they're invisible systems, computer programs that are kind of in the background, processing data, processing information about us, and making decisions about our lives. So perhaps that's progress in terms of public awareness, public understanding of AI. But it's clear that we also have a bit of an image problem with AI. AI definitely has an image problem. And I often wonder, why are these narratives of existential risk and superintelligence so persistent? Why are they so pervasive? Why do they keep coming around again and again and again? And it's because they're really familiar. Like, we've all heard them before, haven't we? The idea that AI might develop superintelligence, that it might be able to make its own decisions, that it might develop its own intentions, choose its own course of action, and ultimately be a threat to humanity. I've seen that movie. I've actually seen quite a lot of movies like that. It's a pretty well-established narrative. It's the plotline of basically every major sci-fi blockbuster about AI, every work of fiction about AI. We've heard these narratives again and again and again, and they're incredibly compelling. And in part, they're compelling because they're so familiar. That familiarity makes them compelling. And they're always very close at hand in media reporting around AI. It's a very persistent narrative, a persistent idea of how to represent AI within the media. But that familiarity doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it real. And it's not real. But what really troubles me about this, and one of the things that keeps me awake at night, is that while these narratives have always been persistent, we've always encountered these narratives in kind of public discussions around AI, or media engagement, media representations of AI. But until very recently, they've very much been on the fringes of credible discussions around AI. But that all changed at the start of this year. It started with earlier, at the start of this year, Sam Altman saying that he was worried that if AI went wrong, it could be lights out for all of us, which is pretty terrifying. Then a couple of months later, there was Geoffrey Hinton, who resigned from Google, saying that he was worried that AI might be developing its own form of non-biological intelligence, an intelligence that would supersede human intelligence and ultimately pose a threat to the future of humanity. And since then, the floodgates have really opened, and we're hearing more and more of these claims coming from people working in big tech, often coming from voices in Silicon Valley, the big names in big tech companies. And that is giving it a sense of credibility. It's increasingly, we're hearing these claims, hearing these narratives being repeated and being listened to within not just media representations of AI, but also in regulatory discussions and also in policy discussions. And that really, really worries me. It doesn't help as well that the media reports of these claims, each time somebody comes out with these statements or these claims about existential risk from AI, or there's a statement that's signed by lots of signatories, the media loves to suggest that these are the leading AI researchers, which poses a really interesting question about how or who is defining a leading AI researcher. That's a rant I'll have another day, but I'm happy to have it. But it's interesting the way that the terms that come up, the titles, the accolades that come up to describe the AI researchers, the AI scientists making these claims. And there's lots of interesting titles and accolades for AI researchers. For example, I already mentioned Geoffrey Hinton, who resigned from Google, citing his fears around AI developing superintelligence and posing an existential threat. Geoffrey Hinton is known as the godfather of AI. Which I think is an interesting one. I don't know much about godparents' responsibilities, roles and responsibilities. I have seen the movie. I'm not sure that that is the best example. But yeah, a godfather. They're meant to guide their godchild spiritually, morally, ethically. I don't think a godparent is meant to put their hands up when they come of age and say, oh, help, we developed a monster, but keep on building it, put it out there, somebody else can fix it. That's not really what a godparent is meant to do. But Geoffrey Hinton isn't the only godfather of AI. AI actually has 3 godfathers. 3 godfathers and no godmother. Not even a fairy godmother, which seems an awful shame. And I think this might be part of the problem, right? The AI industry, especially big tech firms, Silicon Valley tech firms, are still dominated by men, really largely dominated by men. And that's despite a lot of rhetorical commitments to equality, diversity, and inclusion. It's despite a lot of well-intentioned efforts to increase diversity within tech. It's still dominated by men. And these claims around existential risks, these claims around the risk to humanity posed by AI, are largely coming from fairly affluent, fairly privileged men. But there are plenty of women, there are plenty of non-binary people, there are plenty of people from very diverse backgrounds who are speaking about risks of AI, who have been leading the field of ethics and ethics of AI, and seeking to draw attention to the ethics and risks of AI for a long time. So if anybody is looking to nominate a godmother or even a fairy godmother for AI, a good place to start would be this annual list of 100 brilliant women in AI ethics. And if we're looking for people who have experience of big tech or experience of large language models, 2 strong contenders might be Timnit Gebru or Margaret Mitchell. Tim Gebber and Margaret Mitchell are both ex-Google employees. They were both ousted from Google 2 years ago for speaking out about the risks of large language models. But there are some really stark differences when we look at the departures of Gebber and Mitchell compared to the so-called godfather, Hinton. So while Hinton left Google citing claims of fears of existential risk from AI, from large language models, Timnit and Gebber and Mitchell left Google citing very different kinds of fears or over very different kinds of concerns around the risks of AI. Not existential risks, not risks that AI might develop superintelligence, but rather risks of the environmental impacts of large language models and developing bigger and bigger models. Risks of building large language models on vast data sets that contain sexist and racist language and the impacts that has for outcomes. And risks around potential misinformation or disinformation that could be created through the development and deployment of large language models. Risks that are now very well evidenced, very concrete, very real, and very present. But when Hinton left Google, citing his concerns around existential risk, the commentary from Google was one of gratitude for his long service and well wishes. But the departure of Gebber and Mitchell was considerably less cordial. So it begs the question, what's really going on here? What is this really all about? And what it's all about is deception, sleight of hand, trickery. It's all an illusion. It's all a distraction. So each time these claims are being made about existential risk, it's asking us to look the other way. Not to look at the current risks, the current impacts of AI within society, not to look at the concrete, real choices and decisions that are being made by big tech companies, but instead to look at hypothetical, far-fetched future scenarios. We're at a critical moment now where governments and international organizations around the world are grappling with the challenges of developing approaches to effectively regulate AI. It's no coincidence that when these statements have come out, when these claims and statements around existential risk have come out, it's coincided with key developments in the development of regulatory approaches, not least the EU AI Act. That's not a coincidence. And so what is happening here is that each time that these statements are coming out, it's moving the focus away from the very real risks, the risks that the likes of Timnit Gebber and Margaret Mitchell and many others have been warning about for years, and instead suggesting that this is not so much about decisions of organizations or people, but hypothetical ideas that AI itself might be able to be held accountable in the future, or AI itself might be evolving and shaping its own destiny and its own role. And that is all an illusion and a distraction. And what keeps me awake at night is that to a certain extent it's actually working. We're hearing these narratives being repeated, we're hearing them being referred to in regulatory discussions, in policy discussions, and that is really scary. And it's not helped that the AI that is being developed and the AI that's been put out into the world is creating this illusion of some kind of intelligence. So we have systems like ChatGPT, large language models, which are conversational, which mimic human language, but have no understanding, no concept of reality, no ability to understand what they're actually saying. It's just an illusion. It's just mimicking language. It's basically a predictive text, sophisticated predictive text. But all of this is furthering this idea that there's only a small number of actors in the world, big tech players, who have access to the expertise or the knowledge to be able to understand what's happening. And it's creating this illusion that there's something magical, something so complex that governments, regulators need to hear from big tech what the issues are, because nobody else could possibly understand it. That's not true. That's nonsense. But if we're to pull back the curtain, this is all a facade, and if we're to pull back the curtain, what would we find? Well, not just one man behind the curtain, but it would reveal the corporate machinery. It would reveal that this is all about choices, it's all about decisions. It would reveal a series of very concrete, very real, controllable choices and decisions about how these technologies are designed, how they're developed, how they're deployed, what purposes they're used for, and whose voices or whose interests are reflected within all of those decision-making processes. And those are the things that policy and regulation should be focusing on, not the distraction of artificial general intelligence or existential risk. Now, I said I would tell you what kind of researcher I actually am, following my children's disappointment that I can't build them a robot, and the relief that I'm not going to destroy the world. I'm an ethics researcher. So at the Alan Turing Institute, I'm an ethics fellow. And my work looks to explore the risks of AI and develop approaches to minimize and mitigate the negative impacts and risks of AI technologies, but also to seek to maximize the benefit and the value of AI across society, ensuring that the benefits of technology are equitably distributed across society. The future of AI is not decided, and it's important to know that AI is not just big tech, and AI is not just massive models like large language models like ChatGPT. It's all kinds of things. And the future of AI depends on who controls that future. These pictures are from a project that I absolutely love, that has been a real privilege to be a part of, which is a collaboration between the Alan Turing Institute, the Children's Parliament, and Scottish AI Alliance, where we've been working with primary school children between the ages of 8 and 11 across Scotland to involve them in discussions around children's rights and AI, and to discuss with children how they want to be involved in shaping the future of AI. These children have a lot to say, and their voices need to be heard. But so do the voices of lots of other diverse groups who are impacted by AI and will continue to be impacted in the future. But these impacts don't all have to be negative. AI can have incredibly positive negatives. AI can have incredibly positive impacts. With things like monitoring environments, monitoring endangered species like the bumblebees that I saw at the beginning, facilitating opportunities for citizen science, for people to get involved in those processes. Things like developing assistive technologies for people who are visually impaired or have hearing loss. Or developing systems for processing complex information, public information, to hold governments to account. Incredibly valuable, important stuff, but only if it's in the hands of the public, in the hands of community, in the hands of civil society. And that's what really excites me. When we think about the future of AI, it's not just big tech. We need to put AI in the hands of everybody and allow everybody a voice in shaping the future directions of the technology. And that's what my work is all about. And I hope that you will join me in shaping the future conversation of AI and ensuring that it is a positive force within society. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you. And I guess, it's interesting, your contention, because, ultimately, so the big tech folks who are seemingly fighting to get on the end of humanity bus, and how someone comes up with an estimate that it's the 10 to 20% chance of ending humanity. I just wonder where the math was for that. But it's also, I guess to some extent, clearly the media has an interest in playing it because it gets clicks. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, trying to understand the plumbing of AI and why there's some bad stuff in there is a lot less sexy than we're all going to die, right? Politicians, I guess, also potentially have a conflict of interest there as well, because it's kind of like maybe the equivalent of the Russians of the 1980s for America and the West, if you will. It's you need a villain so that it kind of becomes a smokescreen for spending lots of money on things and holding annual summits that all the world leaders attend and gives them something to do and all that sort of jazz. But I'm less clear about the big. So so is your contention that all these folks that are piling onto this bus, that there is a either conscious or unconscious desire to, if you say, create this hobgoblin, if you will, of the monster of AI? As effectively a distraction thing?
I think there are a range of different views, and there are definitely people who believe in this narrative and passionately believe that to be true. But there are also a lot of people who are making these claims for cynical reasons and are making these claims because it's convenient and because it distracts from what's actually happening. Yeah. That's absolutely happening. Okay. But you're right, that the media loves this because it's sensational. Yeah. And you can show pictures of Terminator. I did it too. Yeah. We need more movies that are showing AI as just computer programs for processing complex information. I would watch that movie, but maybe it wouldn't be such a blockbuster, but it was a niche audience. I would watch that movie.
Well, yeah. So we need a tech movies for good movement. Is what we really need. Okay, so just and what is the smokescreen distracting us from? What, in your view, are I'm sure there are many, but a prime problem of AI as it's being rolled out today?
Yeah, there were lots of risks around AI, risks around bias and how that bias is then incorporated into decisions that make decisions about our lives and impact our futures, impact our lives. There's risks around misinformation. There's environmental impacts of these models. There's all kinds of things. And I think we saw that smokescreen very clearly, like when Sam Altman talked in Congress and then went on his tour around Europe, and he said, we really want effective regulation for AI, and then the EU turned around and said, okay, how about approaches to ensure that not discriminatory impacts of your models? And then he was like, no, don't regulate me. Regulate a hypothetical future. Regulate this hypothetical idea that AI could be accountable. Don't regulate us. And I think that was a really clear example. And we see that. We see that again and again. It's about imagining that AI somehow could be accountable for its impact, rather than it being industry, people, organizations who need to be held accountable for the decisions that they are making.
Interesting. Mhairi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.